The topic is: are only rising literacy rates responsible for reducing poverty rates? This is a team project by Kumar Dharv and Harkamaljeet Kaur. Why is this question important? In today's world, agreeing to someone else's narrative is incredibly easy. We tend to agree to things that might sound logical but support it without confirming with real evidence first. Our aim is to research as a group as to whether the narrative that education plays an important role in reducing poverty is actually accurate. Now you know these graphs are true just because of the international consensus on when the global adult literacy rates go up, the poverty rates go down. But for us, this is not interesting. What if I told you that there is more to this relationship of literacy rates and poverty rates? This is the adult literacy rate of Brazil. Guess what the chart of poverty looks like? Bam. Anything interesting? Did you notice the uptick in Brazil's chart? Wait, let me make it more clear for you. Now, you might say that this isn't something compelling. There just might have been a disaster or a flood or something, which is a respectable argument, but look at this. The literacy rates of South Africa are going up, the poverty rates are also going up from 2010 to 2014. This chart is for Togo. These are for Argentina. The literacy rates, these charts are for Argentina. While the literacy rate has remained constant from 2007 to 2015, the poverty rates have been growing. And now look at this chart depicting the poverty rates in the US going up from 2000 to 2010, even while the literacy rates of the US remained largely the same till 2015. Okay, you might be wondering now that after viewing so many charts, there is some funky relationship between the literacy rates and the poverty rates of these countries. But why am I showing you all of this? It's a genuine question. We looked all over the internet and we found out a lot of the same stuff. Improve education and get lower poverty rates. Heck, we even asked ChatGPT if that was true. It told us something similar to our knowledge, but we knew that literacy rates and poverty has a special relationship about which we wanted to find out more, which is why we delved deep into this rabbit hole. First, we looked at the countries which had the highest reduction in poverty levels as a percentage of the population. First, we looked at Tanzania and how it was able to reduce poverty rates by almost 3.2%. Many sources such as the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development and the World Bank suggested that a considerable contributor towards Tanzania's lower poverty rate had been. In this, Tanzania's fertility rate is reducing year over year. And notice how Tanzania's poverty rate is also going down with it. Intrigued, we looked further into the fertility rates of other countries in the previous chart. This is the fertility rates of Tajikistan, and it is going down while the poverty rates are also going down with it. Now the pattern really started to emerge. This really intrigued our interests. But you might say that these are relatively small countries, which is why we look towards the world's largest country by population, India. And just like the graphs before, as the fertility rates of the country is going down, the poverty rates are also going down with it. But what if we take it to the next level and analyze a country with a rising poverty rate and try to find out its fertility rate? Now look at the same time period on the chart displaying Japan's fertility rates. Notice any similarities. While the fertility rate of Japan was rising, so was the poverty rate. and the rising poverty rates have still not yet recovered yet. This interesting relationship caught our eye, and we set out to figure out just why this relationship might be true. When we found out about Robert Malthus. Who is this, you might ask? Well, this Polish man was a very influential British economist in the 18th and 19th century. Apart for being very famous for the Malthusian theory, he also suggested that high fertility rates were a primary cause of poverty. He argued that when the population grew too quickly, the labor force would expand, which would lead to an oversupply of labor and decrease in wages. This, in turn, would lead to poverty and misery. He believed that poverty was a natural consequence of unchecked population growth, and that the only way to avoid it was to limit the number of children people had. This spurred an entire chain of thought, and its followers were named Neo Malthusians. In the 1960s and 70s, these followers of Malthus rallied the government of developed countries to offer foreign aid to governments in developing countries with stipulations to control and reduce the fertility rates. The Bangladeshi economy was one of the prime examples, and after the high fertility rates were reduced from 7 children per child to 2 children per woman, the poverty rates came falling down, which potentially to grow Bangladesh's economy from $18 billion to $416 American billion in 2021. Our team now set our sights on our own country and researched the states with the highest fertility rates and their poverty rates. The states with the highest fertility rates, Bihar and Meghalaya, had one of the highest poverty rates as well, according to the Reserve Bank of India, with Bihar being the state with the highest population living in poverty and Meghalaya being the third highest. Next, we investigated where the countries with the world's highest poverty rates would rank on the freedom score. We found out that there possibly can be a link between the poverty rates of a country and its ranking on the freedom score. Because of the countries have been ranking low in the freedom score except Malawi. We also tried to analyze the data on the countries with the highest poverty rates and their governance structure, and how long the current men have stayed in power in that position, along with whether the country has experienced a coup in the past 20 years. Despite a majority of the countries being under some form of presidential rule, we could not find a correlation between their length of time in power and their country's poverty rate. We believe that the reason for these countries having the world's highest poverty rates and majorly having a governance structure with some form of presidential rule is that these leaders might possibly prioritize their own self interests before their country's interests, such as being involved in bribery or using the country's resources for their own personal use. And it might be also possible that these men cannot consider all of their views on decisions for the countries, which is why there can be a possible disconnection between the needs of these countries and the plans of the policymaker. Many of the countries have experienced one, and in Niger, multiple coups in the past 20 years. However, we did not find a strong correlation between political instability and high poverty rates. Next, we looked at countries with the highest poverty rates in the world and their respective labor force participation rates. And despite having the world's highest poverty rates, the majority of the countries had labor participation rate above 70%. nowhere near the countries with the lowest labor force participation rates in the world. Poverty's correlation with the labor force participation rates is highly unlikely. Another determinant for the poverty rates could possibly be the quality of healthcare provided, which is why we looked at the infant mortality rates to estimate the quality of healthcare available. We have collected the child mortality rates and their rankings, and after analyzing the data, we now believe that there is also a correlation between the quality of healthcare available and the poverty rates. Our conclusion is that the literacy rates are an important measure for poverty. However, poverty is an extremely complex issue. During the investigation, we found out that poverty is not just dependent on the literacy rates, but the fertility rate, the freedom index, the governance structure, and along with the political stability of the country. The investigation has led us to believe that countries that have a combination of these factors generally tend to have the lowest poverty rates.